Hi everyone. I'm really pleased to be having a conversation with Fi Costa today, who's done some really good research lately. We want to share more about it so that you can consider how this might apply to your own experience of aging and also how it might impact the work that you do among older people in churches. Fi, welcome. Introduce us to yourself and this lovely piece of research.
Well, thank you, Alex, very much. It's really lovely to have this conversation with you. Um, I have a few different hats that I wear, most of them related to old age. Within the church context, I've been involved in running concerts for older people for many years, and my most recent iteration of that is a series of cafe concerts, which I do at St Paul's Hammersmith, and they're multi-generational. So we have everyone from mums and toddlers to people from the local care home and everyone in between, really. Um, but I suppose they were born out of my real concern for older people and wanting to incorporate them into the life of the community. So that's one hat. And then my other hat, which is where the research comes from, is I'm a research fellow at the University of Roehampton. And until this research on old age, I had actually been researching how music affects people in old age. But during COVID, I obviously had quite a lot of time on my hands, and I began to think about um, how the fear of old age is very relevant to so many people, and I wanted to find out more about it. So I did a big survey, which obviously was quite an easy thing to do in COVID. And it took me a long time to analyze all the results. I had well over 3,000 people take part. So there was a lot of data. And I wrote it up 2 years ago. And then on the back of that, some of the findings were interesting. So I did a focus group study, and that I published a couple of months ago. So
Wow,
that's me.
that sounds really good. I've been to your cafe concerts. I tell everybody about it, so any viewers who have heard me speak before will know about it. But I just love that blend of bringing the older people together and bringing, I think, what's the toddlers and the mums and dads together. And I just love that the joy in the room of people choosing songs and doing sing-alongs and anything from Amazing Grace to the theme tune of The Lion King, as I recall. And it was a really, really special morning. So yeah, that's a
Yeah,
brilliant piece of work.
it is a special event. I think I had done concerts just for older people before, and I just felt, it's
Mm.
so in danger of siloing older people off as in sort of in events that are just for them. And it's so nice to have them amongst everybody else. And it's especially lovely singing with children. It brings such joy. You can just see their faces light up.
Yeah. And
Um,
the interactions as well, the little ones going up to the older people and, there'd always be a little handhold or something going on there. And it was really sweet. And you could see that it was mutually beneficial. There must be a lot of toddlers that don't really know older people who live near them, especially perhaps living in Hammersmith, where families may be more dispersed throughout the country. And also for the older ones to see the little ones in that same vein. So
Yeah,
yeah, very,
and we
very
also have
charming.
children from the local primary school, which is a fairly new idea,
Mm,
and that's just been such a blessing.
mm.
They're just gorgeous.
Yeah,
Their head teacher brings them along, and they serve cookies, and again, that's I think many of them don't ever see anyone who I would describe as being older.
mm,
Um, and so some of the people we have, a friend of mine came along this morning in a wheelchair. She's 92. They wouldn't see people of that age.
no.
And so it's I mean, and again it's both, it works both ways, as exactly as you said.
Mm, mm.
Mm.
Really lovely. Well, anyway, we're here to talk about this research and tell us a bit more about who did you survey and what did you discover?
Okay, well it was a survey of people between the ages of 35 and 75.
Mm,
And what I was interested in seeing is were there any different attitudes depending on age, depending on gender? and there were a whole other load of questions that I
Mm.
asked. I was interested in whether they had faith, whether they had children, um, and I was interested in their personalities, to whether that had any effect. There's been a little bit of research in this area before, but not a lot. And some of the findings that have been well in the sort of public arena, the fact that younger people tend to be more fearful of old age than older people themselves, and this was
Mm-hmm.
borne out in my research.
Mm.
Personality-wise, I think people who are more introverted and neurotic is one of the sort of
Mm.
personality characteristics in a questionnaire. They tended to be more fearful of old age, which I think perhaps you might expect.
Mm.
Um, but I found other things which were really surprising to me anyway. They were just the opposite of what I had expected. Um, when I asked people about faith, I asked, different religions and how committed people were to them, um, and then analysed the effect that and how that correlated with their fear of old age. And the findings were extraordinary in the survey. It showed that people who had a strong commitment to a faith were more fearful of old age than people who didn't. So that surprised me. And then another surprising finding was that parents had more fear of old age than people who didn't have children. Um,
Wow.
both those findings were surprising to me, and to be honest, that wasn't really what I set out to look for. They were just demographic questions that I thought would be
No.
interesting.
You'd think,
Um,
certainly for the first question, that it would be the opposite, that people who have a strong faith would, um, broadly speaking, have an understanding of where they're going and that that would be a positive thing. What was going on there, do you think? Why was
well,
it that
yeah.
people of faith seemed more fearful of aging?
Well, I think it's, a survey is a very blunt instrument, so you can get some basic answers to questions, but you don't know what's going on behind. So on the
Mm.
back of that, I thought, well, I perhaps I could explore this a bit further. So I did a focus group study. So I had four focus groups, and two of the focus groups um, had a strong Christian faith. And I
Mhm.
just left it as I thought to introduce other religions at this stage was too difficult within a fairly small sample. So two groups were strongly committed Christians, and two groups were not. Um, so I thought it would be interesting to compare that, and then I divided those two groups. One was a younger group, and one was an older group.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so I mean, if I talk about the faith issue, it became very clear that it was the commitment to their faith which was the mediating factor in the fear of old age. So people who were really committed to their faith, um, they were regular churchgoers. You could tell from their conversation that they were fully signed up to their faith.
Mm.
They had less fear of old age.
Okay.
The people who were perhaps what we would call more cultural Christians,
Mm.
perhaps they'd been to a Christian school or grown up going to church but had lapsed since, were very much more fearful of old age. And then the
Mm.
interesting thing actually was that people who were very committed as atheists had also had less fear of old age. So,
Wow.
so I think the overall finding is it's that people who have convictions um, and sort of feel they know what the future holds in a sense, whether
Mm.
that's whether that's
Good or
as a
bad?
or as yes, exactly, had less fear than people who were just slightly
Mm.
confused about what they believed and weren't really committed, had leftover um, uh, sort of Christian beliefs from their childhood,
Mm.
perhaps, or youth. Um, and they were the ones who experienced more fear. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And obviously, it would be lovely to explore that all even more.
Mm.
But I haven't done that yet.
No, it would be interesting to know what, if there are any remnants of their perhaps time at Sunday school or church assemblies or whatever, if there were any little memories of certain verses or facts that are actually fueling this fear at this time. I wonder if they've retained memories of certain biblical truths without perhaps having the gracious truths around that, and of course a way forward around that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, there were a few Catholics who really were fearful of hell and
Mm,
all of that, which
mm,
is, which one can totally understand. And I think they didn't have any understanding of the grace of Jesus
mm,
and salvation.
yeah.
So they didn't have a future hope.
Mm,
Um, I mean, even though this was a smaller sample of people, it's still very broad and
mm,
it needs drilling down to find out a little bit more. But I suppose it does raise issues as to what perhaps we should be doing in our churches and
mm,
in our local communities.
mm,
The fear of old age is a big thing.
mm,
A large proportion of the people in my survey had some level of fear of old
mm,
age.
mm,
And I was telling Alex earlier, I've just had my 70th birthday, and I'm beginning to enter into this different stage of life.
mm,
Um, and when I go and visit a care home, I'm aware that some of the people are the same age as me, and some
mm,
of them are not very much older. And and so I think as we all get older, we do become closer to our future, and these issues raise their heads.
mm. Yeah,
So I think it is something that we don't tend to talk a lot about in church, at least in my experience, we don't. And there are lots of reasons for that, and it's not a criticism. There's so many things that we can be talking to in church, aren't there? Um,
definitely. But I think preparing us for the later stages of life is really vital. We don't want people to live with fear. You can't really circumnavigate that season of life. And so actually we do need to be preparing people for that in the best possible way. And actually, I presume, things like helping people just to name the fear, just to be in groups, perhaps in their home groups or whatever, where they can actually talk about it. I wonder if perhaps in some Christian circles, we're supposed to be all super jolly and excited about heaven all the time, that we don't necessarily look in the eye what the season ahead might bring for us, actually. And of course, if I think towards um, my later life, of course I want to be with Jesus. Of course I want to be in heaven. Of course I want a new body and not have worries and tears and fears and all of these things. But what if I had a grandchild on the way at the same time? I wonder if that might change the speed at which I'd be ready for that. And actually, just not really knowing the process of those final seasons, I think, is a mystery, and God knows it. But I can see that there would be fear and that there would be, yeah, a desire not to keep on aging so fast, really, and to stay a while longer.
yes, I think there are so many different aspects of old age which do I think yeah, I mean it's interesting. Some people think about it a lot more than others.
Mm,
Um, that was another thing that came up in my focus group actually. Which I found quite interesting. I mean, it's not particularly relevant to this conversation, but when I found that parents were more fearful of old age than people
mm,
without children, one of the reasons for that is that parents tend to look ahead to the future much more because they see the next generations coming on. They want
mm,
to help their children or their grandchildren, and they're in a sense passing the baton. And people without children, um, don't have those kind of things. They and in my focus groups, those without children were very much more focused on their present,
mm,
and I think that was quite an interesting
mm.
finding. And it's true for all of us. Some of us think about the future much more,
Yeah.
and some of us don't. And I think for people who are looking ahead and thinking, "Ooh,"
Mm,
there are some very real fears, but I think we that's where I think the church can come in to encourage. I was reading the other day in Romans 8, that verse about nothing can separate us from the love of God. And one of the things that it says, neither the present nor the future can separate us
Mm,
from the love of God. And I don't think I'd ever really noticed that one before.
mm,
And I thought, yeah, thank you, Lord.
mm,
My future can't separate me from your love. I can
mm.
trust you all the way. And
Yeah.
I think that the church has well, and the Christian, I don't want to sort of put the burden on the church, but the Christian community
Mm,
has a lot to contribute to try and help people as they age to view the future as part of life,
yeah.
and, and God is going to be there with us as we go through it.
That's such a lovely, helpful reminder. Yes, at Faith in Later Life, we find that in general, there's a whole raft of stuff that people often don't talk about or consider as we go on into later life. I've had a similar conversation with somebody who's very passionate about people writing a will and having some thought about what might happen in later life. We know that there are people in denial about perhaps doing a downsize a little bit earlier in later life, really to
Mm.
help future proof their independence going forward. There are lots of conversations which people fail to have or struggle to have. And actually, the church community is a great place to be really realistic about the next stages of life and actually helping them to be more joyful during that time. And yeah, I'm a big fan of that independence, which we kind of need to plan for if we want to claim it in those later years. So, what are some of the practical ways you think that churches could help make some of these conversations happen, or teachings even perhaps?
Well, that's a really good question, and I don't know that I have some really good answers because I'm very much thinking about that in
Mm,
my context.
mm,
Um, I think those conversations need to be in a small group setting,
mm,
because that's the only place where you can really talk to people openly and honestly and where there's trust.
mm,
And and I think a lot of those things they need to be sort of ongoing conversations
mm,
worked through with people. So I mean, as far as I've been thinking about how I want to try and
mm-hmm,
address this issue in my context, I'm thinking I have various older people who I visit and see, and it's trying to open up this
mm,
conversation, saying, let's talk about it.
mm,
Because a lot of people, I'm sure, as you know, don't want to talk
mm,
about it. Um, and they don't
absolutely.
really want to think about it because if you don't think about it, perhaps it won't happen.
Yeah.
But as you were saying, I mean, it's much better to talk about it both practically in terms of, well, like you were saying, downsizing or whatever it might be, but also just in terms of how you do deal with it spiritually, how you face life, and some of the challenges that are going to happen.
Mm,
Um, with grace and optimism.
mm,
And I don't mean a false optimism because that would be silly. I mean, everyone's aging experience is different. For some, it's going to be more challenging, and for others, we
yeah.
don't know. That's one of the challenges. We don't know what's ahead for each of us.
Mm,
But I do think in a small group context, either one to one or in a small group, is probably the place to deal with it. I don't think it's the place for sermons.
no.
I don't think that really works. I
Mm,
think it is building up friendships, building up
yeah.
trust, and then talking about it like that.
Mm.
I don't really have any more insight than
No,
that,
no,
but maybe others do.
I think I think that's a really great starting point. The small group settings to begin to have these conversations about the future, about what does the Bible say about the future? What's been my experience of it so far? What have I seen others do well? And there's all sorts of different areas, I suppose, we could cover in those conversations, like um, making good provision for our futures, whether it's through a will, whether it's through powers of attorney, all of these really practical things.
Mm.
And I think sometimes as Christians we mustn't shy away from the practicalities. Jesus himself was very, very practical. When he was dying on the cross, he said to John, "This is your mother," and he said to Mary, "This is your son." So he made
Mm.
that provision for her and for them at that time. And so we mustn't shy away from it. But we could talk about the practicalities in those small groups. We could just have an opportunity to name our fears, and also to perhaps venture into conversations about the reality of failing health for many as later life advances, and again how we might provide for ourselves for that stage in the first instance, and perhaps what the kind of support we would value during that time. I think we often talk about retirement, and about our finances for that phase and what we're going to do with our time, and that's wonderful in those early stages of retirement. But in those later stages, there's still a fresh wave of planning and conversation that would be really helpful. And I suppose for those small groups that actually have a number of older people there already, as well as some younger ones, actually to glean from that. It's a real opportunity to cheer each other on for if and when some of those things happen as well. So it's a way of being family, I suppose, more intimately, because we're talking about real things.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It's trying to get people to really be honest about their
Mm,
real feelings. I mean, interesting. I mean, you touched on it just then. In the survey, I did look at the different fears that were particularly challenging, and not
mm,
surprisingly, the fear of future ill health was a big one,
mm.
and the fear of dementia.
Yeah.
Those two were the predominant fears that scored the
Mm.
highest. And there
Yeah.
are other things like loss of status and things like that, and being patronized, and um, all
Mm.
those things are very real,
Yeah.
but they're not as fear-inducing, perhaps, as
Mm.
future ill health, either cognitive or physical.
Yeah.
And
And you interviewed some people who are only in their 30s, I believe. Is that
I
right?
did, yeah.
What did
Mm.
what did anything come to the fore out of that group of people?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I mean, it's interesting. The 35s to 45s, they had more fear than others.
Mm,
It still was interesting. The fear of ill health still came up
mm,
with them,
mm,
but there were other more social issues which were issues for them. And I think also sort of physical appearance
mm.
it was a particular issue, which seems 35 seems incredibly young to be thinking about that, but it is a real thing.
Yeah.
And
Oh, we are, we're in an Instagram world now, of
yes,
that perfection, and I can see that, yeah, natural
uh,
aging won't necessarily be appealing
yeah,
um,
exactly.
to
And
some.
yeah, it is interesting, and I think for some people in their 30s and 40s, they don't, in our society we don't mix enough the different generations, so
Mm,
they tend to see sort of what I call, old. I mean, when I'm talking about old age, I suppose although it starts earlier, but I really am talking about people in their 80s for whom life's
mm,
becoming a challenge.
mm.
They don't see many people
Yeah.
that age. They don't spend time with them, and I think sometimes that increases the fear because
Mm,
it becomes something. Oh my goodness, that looks terrifying.
mm.
Um, and I don't want to go there. But then I don't want to spend time with older people because that's scary too.
Yeah.
So I think we do tend to avoid each other, which is
Yes.
I think
I
that's one of the areas. The church is such a wonderful place where
mm,
people of any age, any background can come
mm,
and be welcomed. And that's why I think we need to encourage churches to
mm.
foster that, to not divide up the ages too much, but to
Yeah.
allow situations where we can all intermingle, get to know each other.
Yeah. And I think that brings us neatly back to where we began, really, which is intergenerational ministry, like your cafe concerts, bringing,
Mm,
I suppose, the two more extreme ends of the generations together. But of course, intergenerational ministry, includes all the generations. Even in yours, you've just said you've got the primary school children. You will undoubtedly have the mums and dads There, you've also got carers often bringing along people from care homes. So you've probably got a really good spread
Mm.
of
Yeah,
a
we
of
do.
the generations
Yeah,
there. And I
yeah.
think, what's wonderful about that and seeing those charming interactions between the youngest and the oldest is it takes away this otherism that we've created in our society by separating everybody into their age groups. And I suppose it just banishes that divide and helps us to cross it and to know one another. Because I think if some of these 30-year-olds perhaps were friends with those men and women in their 80s and 90s in your church or in others, and yes, would see the lines and see some of the things that are happening to people in later life, but they'd also see some of the amazing things that they are capable of and that they are doing, the wisdom that comes, the stories they have, and the experiences they come with. And so, yeah, taking out that some of those divisions and that
Mm.
otherism, I think might also help to dispel fear as
Yeah,
people
I think
go
that's right.
forward.
I think often we fear the unknown,
Mm,
and obviously our old age is unknown. But if we can take away the fear of older people and the associations with that, I think that would be a wonderful thing. So yes, I mean I had a cafe concert this morning, so I've come fresh from it, and yeah, it
oh,
was very nice, lovely to see that.
yeah. Well, thank you, Fee. It's been really good to hear a bit more about this research and to be reminded about the reality that there is fear of aging out there, even among believers. So this morning at your cafe concert, you would have had all sorts of tunes being sung, I assume.
Gosh, we had a wonderful section. I had two violinists come. They're both
Oh,
students at the Royal Academy. They're just fantastic.
wow.
And they've got arrangements of a huge amount of a mixture of classical and pop
Yeah,
and everything in between, really. We had a bit of Elvis. We had ABBA. Um,
great.
Something about ABBA which makes people really want to get up and dance. There's a sort of change in the room. It's
Yeah,
extraordinary.
yeah.
We had a Bach concerto for two violins,
Wow.
which I played the piano for, which it's
Mm,
always lovely for me to have an opportunity to do that. What else did we have? Oh, we had Edelweiss, Over
okay.
the Rainbow. And
See what a
we just
what an
we
eclectic
it
mix.
was an eclectic mix, and I mean the reason we do that is really so that hopefully everybody has something that they respond to.
Yeah.
We had Taylor Swift and we had nursery rhymes for the children.
So what one do you think was the most popular this morning? What
Oh gosh,
changed the
that's
atmosphere the most?
yeah, that's a really interesting question. I know I mean, in terms of changing the atmosphere, I think ABBA just
Mm,
brings just a huge sort of delightful
yeah, yeah.
excitement whenever
There we
it comes
go.
on.
Maybe
I
we
know
should have
people
a
have,
bit more ABBA on Sunday mornings.
well, I'm not going to suggest that, but it was fun.
Ah, yeah.
So,
Oh,
and yeah, and lovely to see everybody just thinking, oh, this is fantastic, right from the
yeah.
smallest to the oldest.
Yeah,
So,
bring in life. That's
yeah.
wonderful. It's really good to talk to you, Fee. Thank you all for watching and listening to our conversation. Come and have a read of some of our blogs on our website where we talk more about intergenerational ministry and how we can dispel the fear of aging. Bless you.